My name is Claire Bennett, and I was 32 years old when I made the most dangerous mistake of my life. I married a man I loved while hiding the fact that I was worth $68 million. I thought keeping my fortune secret would protect our marriage. I was wrong. 6 years later, my mother-in-law walked through my front door without knocking, carrying a leather folder that could destroy everything I had built. "You have until tomorrow morning to tell my son the truth," Vivian said. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "Or I'll tell him myself." Upstairs, my husband Daniel was completely unaware that his mother had just discovered the secret I had guarded for years. What exactly was inside that folder? Who had told Vivian about my money? And why had she brought a stranger in a gray suit to my home? I wish I could say I understood what was happening that morning. I didn't. I only knew that the blue folder hidden in the bottom drawer of my desk suddenly felt like the most important thing I owned, because inside it were screenshots, dates, messages, and one conversation I had almost forgotten. A conversation that would later make a judge look at Vivian very differently. But before I tell you what was in that folder, you need to understand why I hid $68 million from the man I married. My grandmother, Margaret, had built a small investment company decades earlier. By the time she died, that company had grown far beyond anything our family expected. Through a private trust, she left me controlling ownership. The final valuation was just over $68 million. I could have bought a mansion, changed my life overnight, and never worked again. Instead, I kept driving my 10-year-old Honda and shopping during clearance sales. People might call that foolish. Maybe it was. But I had watched my father receive an inheritance and become someone I barely recognized. Friends became opportunities. Relatives became creditors. Every relationship seemed to develop a price. So when Daniel came into my life, I made one promise to myself. He would fall in love with Claire, not her money. For 6 years, I believed that choice was protecting us. I didn't realize it was quietly building the secret that would eventually put my marriage, my family, and everything I loved at risk, without me knowing. The first person who made me question whether our peaceful life was actually safe wasn't Vivian. It was Daniel's younger sister, Sophie. When Daniel asked if she could stay with us for a few months, I agreed before he finished the sentence. On Sophie's first night, I found her sitting on the guest bed with a small suitcase beside her. Every piece of clothing was still packed. "You know you can unpack," I said. She looked at the suitcase. "I might need to leave quickly." "Why?" She shrugged. "I just do." I sat beside her and said, "You're not going anywhere. Tonight." She studied my face as if promises were things people made before breaking them. "You promise?" "I promise," slowly. She took one sweater from the suitcase and placed it inside the closet. That tiny movement told me more about her past than any explanation could. Over the next few weeks, Sophie changed in small ways. She started eating breakfast with us instead of waiting until everyone finished. She stopped apologizing every time she opened the refrigerator. One Saturday, she asked me to teach her my grandmother's cinnamon bread recipe. I thought we were becoming a family, and for the first time, I believed the house was becoming something more than a place to live. I didn't realize that feeling of safety was exactly what someone else intended to take from us. Then Vivian began visiting more often. At first, she seemed concerned about Sophie. "You're spoiling her," she told me one afternoon. "We're just helping her," Vivian smiled, but her eyes didn't. Sometimes, helping someone means knowing when to stop. That was the first warning I ignored. Soon Vivian began making smaller comments. Why was Sophie spending so much time with me? Why was I paying for her college applications? Why was Daniel suddenly closer to his sister? What I couldn't see was that Vivian wasn't trying to help Sophie. She was testing my boundaries. Then Sophie received an acceptance letter from a community college. Daniel ordered takeout, and we celebrated around the kitchen table. For one evening, everything felt perfect. But Vivian arrived unexpectedly, saw the acceptance letter in Sophie's hand, looked directly at me and asked, "How much are you planning to spend on her?" I smiled. I should have recognized the question for what it really was. Instead, I gave her an answer and watched her quietly calculate something I couldn't see. Vivian wasn't asking about Sophie. She was measuring how much control I had. 2 weeks after Sophie's acceptance, Daniel came home carrying a small cardboard box his mother had given him, and the moment he opened it, something about our peaceful life changed. Inside was an old photograph of Daniel's father standing beside Vivian, with a handwritten sentence on the back. "Everything I built should stay in this family." Daniel stared at it for a long time. "Mom says Dad wanted me to have more," he said. "More what?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't know." Neither did I, but I should have asked why Vivian suddenly cared so much about inheritance. Instead, I convinced myself it was grief. 3 days later, she called me. Her first sentence made my stomach tighten. "I know about Margaret's trust." I couldn't speak. No one outside my advisors should have known the details. "How?" I finally asked. Vivian gave a quiet laugh. "You're not the only person who knows how to look for things." Then, she said something that stayed in my mind all night. "Daniel deserves to know what kind of wife he married." "He will," I answered. "When?" "When I'm ready." Her voice changed. "No, Claire. When I'm ready." I hung up and went straight to the bottom drawer of my desk. There was the blue folder I had started keeping after Vivian's strange comments began. I opened it and reread every screenshot, every date, every message. Then I found one I had almost forgotten. Vivian had written, "I don't care what she owns. I care what we can prove she hid." My hands went cold. That wasn't curiosity. It was preparation. I should have told Daniel immediately. Instead, fear won again. The next morning, Daniel sat across from me at breakfast. He wasn't eating. "My mother thinks you're hiding money from me." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "Are you?" he asked. I could have lied again. Instead, I looked into the eyes of the man. I had spent 6 years trying to protect from my secret. "Yes." His face changed. "How much?" My voice barely came out. "About $68 million. Daniel pushed his chair back. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse me. He simply stared at me as though the woman sitting across from him had become a stranger overnight. "You let me believe we were building everything together," he said. "We were." "No, Claire. You were deciding what I was allowed to know." I wanted to explain everything, but I knew explanations wouldn't erase 6 years of silence. Daniel walked out. 3 days later, he returned, but he wasn't alone. Vivian was waiting outside. 3 days later, Daniel returned home, but the relief I felt disappeared the moment I saw the expression on his face. He wasn't angry anymore. He looked confused, exhausted, and afraid of what he might discover next. "I want the whole truth," he said. I told him everything. Margaret's trust, the company, the reason I had hidden the money, and the fear that had controlled my decisions for 6 years. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said quietly, "I don't know if I can forgive you yet." I nodded. "I understand." Then he surprised me. "But I don't want my mother deciding what happens to us." For one brief moment, I thought we had survived the worst. I was wrong. The next morning, a certified letter arrived claiming Daniel had concerns about financial deception and wanted legal disclosure of our assets. Daniel hadn't sent it. His signature had been copied. Before we could understand who had done it, Sophie received a call from a social worker. Someone had reported that she was being financially controlled inside our home. Sophie came into the kitchen trembling. "I didn't say that," she whispered. "I know," I told her. "They're asking if you're forcing me to stay." Her eyes filled with tears. "Are they going to make me leave?" I had no answer. That question became the new fear hanging over our house. Then, that same evening, Sophie's suitcase disappeared. We searched every room, called her friends, and finally found her at a bus station. She was sitting alone, with the same suitcase she had, brought when she first came to us. "I thought if I left, they couldn't use me against you," she said. I sat beside her. "You don't have to protect me." She shook her head. "Yes, I do." Then she reached into the suitcase and pulled out an old phone. I recorded some things. My heart stopped. For months, Sophie had secretly recorded conversations with Vivian because she was terrified nobody would believe her. The recordings revealed Vivian pressuring her to leave, telling her to accuse me of controlling her, and discussing my fortune with Daniel's cousin. But one recording made everything worse. Vivian said, "She has millions. If Daniel believes she deceived him, everything changes. Suddenly, every strange question, every accusation, and every legal complaint made sense." We hired a forensic accountant. The investigation uncovered emails requesting information about my trust using Daniel's identity, plus a $14,800 payment from Vivian to his cousin. The case was no longer about my secret. It was about what Vivian had planned to do with it. The courtroom was silent when Sophie walked to the witness stand, but I could hear my own heartbeat as she sat down. Vivian sat across from us in a dark blue suit, looking calm and almost offended that anyone had questioned her intentions. The judge asked Sophie whether she understood why she was there. Sophie nodded. Then came the question none of us expected to hear so soon. Where do you want to live? Sophie looked at me, then at Daniel, and finally at Vivian. For years, she had been terrified of choosing the wrong answer. This time, she didn't hesitate. I want to stay with Claire and Daniel. Vivian's expression changed. The judge asked, "Are you certain?" Sophie nodded again. I used to think home was wherever people allowed me to stay. Now I know home is where I don't have to be afraid of being sent away. I felt tears fill my eyes. Then our lawyer presented the evidence. Vivian's messages, the copied signature, the requests for confidential trust information, and the $1,400 payment to Daniel's cousin. Finally, Sophie's recording was played. Vivian's own voice filled the courtroom. She has millions. If Daniel believes she deceived him, everything changes. No one spoke. Vivian tried to explain that she had only been protecting her son, but the evidence told a different story. The judge didn't need a dramatic speech. The documented pattern was enough. The false allegations collapsed under scrutiny, and the copied signature was referred for further investigation. Vivian's credibility was damaged, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, because Daniel and I still had something much harder to repair. Our marriage. He didn't suddenly forget that I had hidden $68 million from him. I didn't expect him to. We went to counseling. We argued. We apologized. Some nights we sat silently across from each other, trying to understand how love could survive so much secrecy. But we stayed. Eventually, we rebuilt our marriage around complete financial honesty. Months later, Sophie finished her first semester of college and came home carrying the same suitcase she had brought on her first night with us. I saw it beside the stairs and froze. She laughed. "Relax, I'm not running away." She opened it and showed me textbooks, clothes, photographs, and the ridiculous stuffed rabbit Daniel had won at a fair. "I'm leaving it unpacked this time," she said. I smiled. That suitcase no longer represented escape. It represented choice. A year later, I opened my desk drawer and found the blue folder. Inside, I placed one final photograph of the three of us together. For years, I thought money was the secret that could destroy my family. I finally understood it was fear. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop hiding and let the truth decide who truly belongs beside you. If this story meant something to you, tell me what you would have done in Claire's place. And subscribe for more stories about family, betrayal, secrets, and justice.